Hi, this is The Philosophical Angle, defining concepts in current media. I am your host, Chris Angle, and I am the author of 4 books in philosophy, one of which is The Nature of Aesthetics. These books are available free for viewing online at www.philosophypublishing.com. Along with me is my panelist, Professor Mark Brennan, from the Stern School of Business at New York University. He is also the American editor of the Quarterly Review of London, established 1809. Glad to have you with us, Mark.
Hi, Chris.
The purpose of the philosophical angle is to examine the nature of concepts being used in current media and compare the essence of the concept with the usage and circumstances in which the term is being used. This week, the subject matter is turmoil in Egypt. So let's get to it. Some time ago, actually in recent, earlier probably this year, was it last year? There was an election in Egypt, and the Muslim Brotherhood was able to garner most of the votes and took over the top spot in the government of Egypt. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood is a fundamentalist, mainstream Islam society, and so once they took over, they wanted to change the constitution, probably to, of course, they wanted to make sure that they remain in power forever and anon. But this produced huge demonstrations, as we all know in the news, so much so that the military decided to step in and take over. And they took over, obviously, because of the demonstrations from the secular Muslims. And they took over because there was being changes, probably even illegal changes, made to the Constitution by the newly elected Muslim Brotherhood leaders. So the turmoil in Egypt developed when the military coup, the second set of turmoil. The first was the first set of demonstrations, and now the second. But now these are these are violent, because it pits the Muslim Brotherhood, who doesn't want to leave power, along with the military. And so there have been violent attacks. And the attacks are leading to a higher and higher death toll. Every day we're reading that in the current news. But the Brotherhood is a mainstream fundamental Islamic society. And what that means is they look to the Quran and to the tradition of sayings of Mohammed beyond the Quran, called the Hadith. And together, those two documents, the history of the Hadith and as well as the holy book of the Quran, have produced Sharia law, and the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as other countries in the Middle East, have wanted to take Egypt to a theocracy, which would have a Quranic hegemony being placed throughout the region and eventually throughout the world. Well, now let's get back to the turmoil now. As we mentioned, there are attacks and violent attacks. And a lot of these attacks have been centered, of course, in confrontation with the military, but they've also attacked the police and churches. The Coptic Christians are probably about 10% of the population in Egypt. And suddenly they attack the churches. Well, why the churches? They didn't have a military coup. They weren't behind that. Kind of a sideshow. So, well, it's an interesting question. And let's explain this a little bit. I think it goes back to when Muhammad, when he started his military expeditions, in one of his first major fights, at Badr, he was outnumbered, and it looked like he would not be able to have victory on his side. So he prayed, and he received a revelation that he would, if he strives, he will win. And that's just what happened. At Badr, Muhammad did win against all odds, and he gets his victory. And what happens, and what Muslims now think, that if they fight hard and if they follow the Quran, victory and rewards will follow. And this is right out of the Quran. Since Muhammad, whenever a Muslim falters, he blames himself for his lack of priority in following the Quran, and he's not successful because it's punishment from God. So the Muslim thinks that he must purify himself by following religiously the fundamentals initiated in the holy book of the Quran. And one of the dictates in the holy book of the Quran is to fight other religions. And he specifically names polytheists, Jews, and Christians. And so this is probably what happens when the Muslim Brotherhood attacks churches, because the military has taken over. They feel that they have somehow faltered or made a mistake, and thus they look to rectify the situation by going back to the Quran and following its dictates. And throughout the history, soon after Muhammad's death, when the Muslims overtook all of the Arabian Peninsula, North Africa, started to go into Asia Minor, they attacked churches, and they either destroyed them or they converted them to mosques. And for those who were in the churches, or who had a religion other than Muslim, they offered them to pay a tax called the jizya. They offered them or to convert or death. And the Quran dictates this. This is right out of the holy book of the Quran. So, what should we do about the turmoil in Egypt? Should the United States do anything? What's happening? The military represents the secular Muslim society, and the Muslim Brotherhood represents a strict interpretation of the Quran, a fundamental interpretation of Islam. And the secular Muslims, they want the life like we had. They want an economy. They want business. They want to go about their general lives. They want to be religious and follow the Quran, and they want to be able to vote in their politics. But they're not strict fundamentalists as the Muslim Brotherhood. So this is a real challenge, and has presented a significant amount of turmoil, not only in Egypt, but also going throughout the Middle East. Although the other battles in the Middle East are pretty much Sunni versus Shiite, and this is secular Muslims versus fundamental Muslims. So what should we do? Let's go to Mark and ask him if he has any ideas, if we should be concerned with it at all, or should we help the military, or not? Mark, what do you think?
Chris, the first thing we should do is start obeying American law. And we have in our law, what exactly is it? Section 508 of the Foreign Assistance Act demands that all American foreign aid to any country be suspended in the event of a military coup. So before we further flush our republic down the toilet, we might want to start obeying our own laws and cut off aid. We should then have a discussion, a national discussion, about either repealing that law or figuring out why we should obey it. But when we pass these laws, we pass them for a reason. And if we're just going to laugh at them when they're supposed to be enforced, then we are no more of a law-abiding society than the mayhem that's going on in Egypt. Let's assume that we've started obeying this law and suspended payments. What should we do? Stay as far away as possible. You know, I keep hearing people screaming about, oh my God, the Suez Canal. Well, lest we forget that from June 1967 to June 1975, the Suez Canal was closed. Completely closed, thanks to the war between Israel and Egypt in 1967. Life went on. If the canal closes again, life will go on. It will be something of an impediment, but there will be incentive from all parties to sit down and negotiate to figure out how to get the canal back open, and that will include the Brotherhood, that will include the generals, and that will include the rest of the world who wants to use the canal. So that argument goes nowhere. Lastly, which I hate to throw out because I sound like a broken record, we should only act when it's in the American national interest. Egypt, as it stands now, poses no threat to the United States, might pose threats to countries that we don't have treaties with, but that we seem to be sworn to defend over there. But it does not pose a threat to the United States. And the sooner we stop acting like we run the world and that everything's a threat to us, the sooner that things will become a little more peaceful and we can start to get our own house in order financially.
Okay, I'm going to take the opposite side of this. I feel that the aid should continue to Egypt, that our 1.2 billion should be continued.
So I know that there's a law. Just to clarify, you're for breaking U.S. law.
Yes, I understand that there is some sort of law in place.
Okay. Let's just laugh at our laws.
But I don't think that that the present amount presently allocated for Egypt should be cut off just yet. I think the Egyptian military has been our ally in the past. They didn't take this coup without just cause. They were trying to avoid a pending civil war. I think the Muslim Brotherhood illegally was trying to take over the Constitution and change and forever to establish them to be forever in power. And I think these are mitigating circumstances, which we can easily see are a rationalization for continuing. And I think it's in our interest to have a stable Egypt. As you said, of course, to the Suez Canal, but of course it's not that vital, but it's certainly helpful.
I think it's worth noting that you hold the Muslim Brotherhood to a higher standard, which is obeying the law, than you hold your own government.
Well, I think that I don't know if you can bind the president in actions of regarding foreign conflicts, but I'm not a constitutional scholar, and that's really not the point here.
With American law.
I don't think we really want to dwell too much on this particular point. What I do want to see is how we can be conducive to quelling the turmoil. And
in good Leninist fashion, if that means breaking the law, breaking a few eggs to make the omelet, then so be it. That's what you're basically arguing.
Rick Samuelson has joined us, and he's a regular discussant on this program. Rick, I think you've seen the flavor, although you might have missed the introduction. but we're discussing the turmoil in Egypt. And would you like to? Do you have any comments at this stage before I go on?
Well, from all I've read, the general consensus seems to be that the West should back the current military government and do everything in its power to discourage the Muslim Brotherhood from succeeding with gaining the reins of power again in Egypt. And the Obama administration seems to be vacillating on this whole issue and would prefer to take a more even-handed approach to the two sides. And there's a lot of context to this. The Muslim Brotherhood obviously has a long history of terrorism and other unsavory activity. So it's a little bit difficult to justify working closely with an organization with that kind of bent. It seems to me that we should keep as much distance as we can from the whole situation. And I'm not sure that I see the need to send that much aid directly to the military. It seems to me as if the Egyptian military is, if you will, beating back the Muslim Brotherhood, and it's kind of their business.
Well, it is their business, so therefore the question of whether the aid should be cut off or the aid should be continued, leaving the legality of the issue aside for a moment, because I don't think Obama cut off the aid because of the legality. I think he cut it off because he feels that he's probably siding with the Muslim Brotherhood more than the Egyptian military, who have probably held the reins to that government for a longer time than we probably realize. And the others, I guess Europe is backing the military, and so is Saudi Arabia. So they are not out there alone. And with the history of the Muslim Brotherhood as it is, a fundamentalist society that certainly strives against our interest at every corner. I can't help but feel that if I were president, I would have continued the aid to the military because I see it helping Egypt as a nation, as opposed to being detrimental to Egypt as a nation. Any response? Go ahead.
Is the central question here continuing or suspending aid, or is the central question which side do we support, or if any?
I guess the central question is what can we do to help quell the turmoil? Now, whether aid is a part of that question or other support is part of that question, we're willing to discuss it, because that's really the ultimate goal here would be to help stop the deaths, help get society back to its everyday normal working life.
See, I don't think this crisis rises to the level of a humanitarian crisis. We don't have a genocide going on here. We have a kind of focused military activity involving two political elements in a foreign country, and it appears to be the case that the side we would, if we're sensible, prefer to win is winning. So I don't see the need for the U.S. to be intimately involved here.
Yeah, but Rick, we always side, we make a big stink about democracy. Egypt held elections, And the Muslim Brotherhood won, and that's not the party we wanted, and that's not what we meant by democracy. Democracy means that the group we want to win wins, not what the people want. And so now when they get deposed, we are supporting the people who were not elected, and which flies in the face of all the stuff we've been promoting around the world for the last 10 years, and just leads to nothing but confusion. So I like your earlier idea, which was just, let's just stay out and stay away. You know, there's an ocean separating us about 10,000 miles of distance. That's the best thing.
Well, you know, I agree half with you, Mark. We should stay out of it, but I believe also that we should continue with the aid, and I disagree with the blanket statement that it was a democratic move to elect the Brotherhood. That's fine, but then they started to try to change the Constitution, and the people didn't like it. The people rose up in the midst of it, and the huge demonstrations that followed. So the people are obviously it's an internal squabble. Obviously, you've got the fundamental.
We have people on this show who are arguing against the law, and we have other people on this show who are rising up in defense of the law, right here on this show right now.
Okay, but it's not a problem without its attendant problems. In other words, it's not a clear cut as you indicate. At least that's how I read it.
What's not a problem?
That it's purely that the Muslim Brotherhood was elected fair and square to their office of control of the government of Egypt, but then they started to change the Constitution, and as I read it, was kind of a illegal change. So that in itself would give the military and the people, and that's caused the tremendous uprising and demonstrations and the massive demonstrations they were. The people did not want to be disenfranchised of their rights from the new government, and that was the cause of the demonstrations. So I think it has a democratic constituent foundation here that we can argue.
Those who voted for the Muslim Brotherhood were not voting for a political party, they were voting for a religio ideology. And so when their guys got in, it wasn't about, oh, now we're going to, obey all the constitutional niceties of Egypt. It was, our religion is now going to rule this state, and there is nothing to stop us. They're Leninists and Trotskyists right out of the neoconservative mold.
Well, I feel that the best thing to quell the overall turmoil, and as Rick says, it's probably just turmoil. It's not it hasn't metastasized into an internecine war, at least yet.
Well, it isn't an internecine war, it's a civil war. Chris, can I ask you what the threat is, what the immediate threat is to the United States that we need to be getting involved in this?
It's not an immediate threat, but it is a long-term threat. I think the Middle East, if it comes under the governance of the Islamists in the form of theocracies, then you will start to see an export of terror come to the West, as it did throughout since Muhammad's death. Till now, there was some time when there was little export of terror, 100 years ago, but with oil money now available, it now has become a prominent possibility again, and obviously, and we've seen that. So I'm not thinking short term like the next couple of months, but long term, we need to think about what the capabilities of the Quran allows its people in being able to commit war against all that are non-Muslim.
Yes, they don't have to do it through terrorism, they've done it through demographics. The West is breeding at below replacement rates and the Muslim world is breeding it well above replacement rates, population replacement rates, and they've colonized Europe and they're colonizing us next. You know, this is a clash of cultures. This is not some political battle going on between two countries. This is a clash of ideology, and the sooner we accept that and say, you know, clamp down on Muslim immigration to the United States, the better off we'll be.
Well, I agree. It's a clash of ideologies, and as Mohammed said in his hadith, he said, "I have been commanded to fight against people till they testify to the fact that there is no God but Allah, and believe in me that I am the messenger from the Lord, and in all that I have brought. And when they do it, their blood and riches are guaranteed protection on my behalf, except where it is justified by law, and their affairs rest with Allah."
The Egyptian military reads the same Quran, don't forget.
And they do, but they are not as, they are secular Muslims as opposed to fundamental mainstream.
No.
And so I don't see them exporting terror as as much as the potential.
Chris, they don't have to export terror. They export people. They've exported people to Europe. They're exporting people to the United States. They're exporting their ideology around the world without terror. The terror attacks have been, you know, fruitless in terms of expanding their global realm.
Yes, that's they are, and Muslims have.
The Egyptian generals are just as happy to send people as the Muslim Brotherhood will be.
Okay, Rick, I've kind of left you out here. Any final remarks? We have about 1 minute left.
Well, I don't see how you're going to succeed in preventing theocracies from continuing to take root in the Middle East easily. I do think we can vigorously oppose any military or terrorist activity on the part of those governments or persons within those countries, and we have to. And that's as far as it goes.
Okay, guys, I want to thank you for joining us. Time is now in short supply, and look forward to having everybody join us again next week. This was the Philosophical Angle. Thanks.